to die for Christ, loving Christ, means to go to glory, means to go to Christ.
Hello YouTube, it's Nathan from the Long Defeat blog here. This is my squeaky chair and yep, he's still here. And tell me something, what's the connection between this?
I'm less impressed with theology which concerns itself with such questions as, does the wine really turn into the blood of Christ, or is it only symbolic? That kind of theology I despise, actually.
And this.
Well, Sharon, Micah, these parents tell me that they have no trouble with their son learning the history about any religion. It's when the school starts teaching him the faith.
It shouldn't be presented to them. They shouldn't be asked to know this.
For more on that, stay tuned.
You've done me wrong. You made me love you, and now you're gone. I'll cry and I'll cry, but I ain't gonna cry no more.
Yes, today's theme is slightly different from last time. Last time we looked at the myth that Christianity is all about being moral or good, and this time we're looking at something literally a bit more academic. Our theme today is that theology, Christian theology especially, is like a fake subject, if you pardon my French. You know, it's sort of like a BS subject. It has no basis or grounding in reality, and it shouldn't be allowed at universities. And as Dawkins just said, well, it is something to be despised. It'll probably come as absolutely no surprise to absolutely anyone that this isn't the only time Dawkins has spoken about this. In the Free Inquiry magazine in the year 2006, Dawkins penned a piece called The Emptiness of Theology, which he said, you can see it on your screen there, what has theology ever said that is of the smallest use to anybody? When has theology ever said anything that is demonstrably true and is not obvious? I have listened to theologians, read them, debated against them. I have never heard any of them ever say anything of the smallest use, anything that was not either platitudinously obvious or downright false. If all the achievements of theologians were wiped out tomorrow, would anyone notice the smallest difference? The achievements of theologians don't do anything, don't affect anything, don't mean anything. What makes anyone think that theology is a subject at all? Okay, I'm coming out, okay? Look, I'm coming out. Don't shoot! Oh gosh, that's harder than I thought it would be. I know that on YouTube it's atheists that run the roost. I know that Dawkins has his zealous fans, and again on YouTube especially, if you speak against them or speak against atheism or speak against Dawkins, God forbid, you will be unliked into oblivion. Look, I just want to call a sort of truth here. I am not trying to suggest in this video that Christians have epistemic warrant, that the right to believe in everything that they believe. However, I would humbly suggest that Dawkins is just a man, he's not perfect, and in this regard, it is silly to follow him in the belief that theology is something to be despised, that it is not a real subject, that it is a fake subject, that it is a nonsense subject, and that it should not be supported as something taught in universities. That's just not tenable, and for a variety of good reasons. And here's why it's not tenable. It all stems from defining a subject's worth, defining an academic subject's worth, a field of discipline, by what it does, by how it functions. Now, at first, it may be that you're listening to this and thinking, Nathan, that sounds absolutely insane. Of course we should define a subject by how much good it does. But let me suggest humbly that for the last 100, if not 200 years, Western society has been infiltrated by utilitarianism, that philosophy that says, that defines something's value by what it does and what it achieves and how much worth it may or may not have. So I would suggest that Dawkins' argument here about the emptiness of theology is simplistically utilitarian. Of course we must talk about what subjects do and don't do, and of course it's helpful, especially in the realm of natural sciences, to talk about what works and what doesn't. That's the whole basis of proving a hypothesis. But it isn't the be-all and the end-all. First of all, theology does serve a number of functions. In order to understand any culture or history, the fact is that religion has played, and faith has played, a huge role. Inevitably, irrevocably, it has played, if not the most important role, in the way in which human beings have shaped civilization. I mean, Dawkins himself says that he has the time for theologians who study texts or interpret old manuscript, but he doesn't necessarily have time for the what we might in the business term systematic theologians or pastoral theologians or biblical theologians. But again, in order to understand a civilization that has been shaped by religion, we must understand the religion itself. We must understand what it means to be religious in that context, in order to understand why they do what they do. It also serves as a historical study of human civilizations and the artifacts they left behind, be that archaeological evidence or manuscripts. It also serves a political function. Look, the reality is humanity is still religious in the majority. And therefore, how can we engage with that reality if we don't understand it? It's not enough to simply say religion exists but we can only study the manuscript. No, we have to understand the belief itself. And then, of course, personally, theology serves real human beings who are religious. At the Long Defeat blog, Aaron, myself and Owen are all Christians. And in our study of theology, it hasn't just been an antiquarian interest that's motivated us, or an academic curiosity. Rather, we regard it as worship. It literally impacts how we live, how we move, how we have our being. So that's the first point, that regardless of Dawkins' protestations, theology does indeed serve a number of functions. The other thing, however, is that what Dawkins is saying, if he's defining a subject's worth by what it does, by whether it's useful, by whether it achieves something, well, that would dismiss other disciplines and disregard them. We wouldn't be happy with this. For example, it would dismiss much of philosophy or English literature or history or art and so on and so forth. And a lot of the problem here is that in English, we don't necessarily have the same tools to describe other subjects as literally a science, that is, scientia, a study of knowledge, regardless of whether it's a natural science like chemistry or biology or physics, or whether it's, say, a humanities. Most of us would not accept the dismantling of philosophy, English literature, art, history, etc., all in the name of utilitarianism. And the third point here that I want to make, and I think this is a killer point, is that Dawkins' logic cannibalizes itself. Dawkins' argument assumes that a subject has value if it has utility, if it is useful, if it works, if it does something, if it's useful. So he's assuming, therefore, that usefulness is valuable. The problem is that value is a subject of philosophical and theological discussion, and therefore he is using something pertaining to philosophy and theology in order to dismiss philosophy and theology. His argument cannibalizes itself. And here is the connection to the school that we referenced all the way back at the beginning of this video. And yes, for the record, I've cut my hair, I've trimmed my beard, and I'm wearing completely different clothes. It is in fact a completely different day, but I thought I'd just let you in beneath the illusion of a YouTube video in case you all thought that this was just one big spontaneous explosion of thought. In that situation, there are a couple of Christian parents who discovered that their child was being taught the contents of Islamic belief, and they objected on the basis that whilst they would be happy for their child to learn the history and the archaeology and the sociology of the Islamic religion, they are not happy for the child to learn the content of that religion, the theology of that religion. And here we see, even though you might well think, well, Nathan, hang on a second, you're a Christian, shouldn't you support them regardless of what they believe, regardless of what they say? No, if a Christian is wrong, then a Christian is wrong, regardless of who they are. They are assuming that the subject of religious studies, for example, should be restricted to historical and sociological and political analysis, an archaeological nod perhaps, and that is a mistake for the same reasons that we have exposited in this video so far. Theology is important, it is a valid subject, and it is not somehow an abandoning of one's convictions or one's faith just because you want to learn it. In order to understand the Islamic faith, you need to understand its theology. Just as if you want to understand the Christian faith, you can't just look at its history or its archaeology or its sociology or politics, you must look at its theology. And that's because, contrary to Dawkins and contrary to these parents, as lovely as I'm sure they are, theology is indeed a valid and real subject, and it's necessary if we are to gain an understanding, not just of the religion in question, and not just of the content of that religious faith, but also of ourselves as a human culture. And that's where we've got to end the video, unfortunately. I want to keep these as short as possible, but I just want to end with one final note. Just as I raised a sort of flag of peace before, I want to do so again. Look, I understand that if you're an atheist watching this, or you're not a Christian, you wouldn't describe yourself as such, it might be difficult to hear any sort of defense of a Christian thing. Perhaps you think that religion is evil, as Dawkins himself has described. And whilst I respect that viewpoint, but disagree with it vociferously, I would ask you to be charitable here. For the reasons described, it simply will not do to dig your head in the sand and say that theology should not exist at university level, that it is not a valid subject, that it is useless. As I have described, theology has multiple uses, both on the personal and societal level, but more than this, in order to dismiss something as useless, you must assume something to be worthwhile, and in order to assume something to be worthwhile, you must have a definition of worth, and that is a philosophical and theological discussion. It is the sort of question that has dogged the humanities, not the natural sciences, as beautiful and as wonderful and as vital and as necessary as those natural sciences are. So I just want to beg here for a sort of peaceful dialogue and discussion that is so rare on YouTube between atheists and Christians, between those who don't believe and those who do. Listen, we can discuss this rationally. We all, both you and I, value truth. In this regard, it is truthful to say theology does have uses, and theology is necessary. There is no abandoning of one's convictions just because one learns of the content of any given faith. That is not an abandoning of the truth, nor is it a betrayal of your convictions. Rather, it is a sign that you value truth. It is a sign that you value dialogue and debate and discussion. Enlightenment values no less, and I would argue, and will go on to argue in another video, distinctly Christian values too. But for the time being, well, that's all we've got time for. So I wish you all the best. I hope you have a great week. I hope you have a great day. Keep the faith, and God bless. Bye.